Well, why? That was that was quite a Brazil, quite a Brazil. Um, Sprint weekend as well. So just so much things to unpack. Um, I probably just gonna have to condense it down in this video because it would just become ridiculously long. And I keep promising second follow-up videos and I don't do them. So I'm gonna stop doing that. And if I do them, I just do them. But other than that, I'm just gonna try and keep the video short, which means I'm gonna condense a lot of stuff. And obviously, I'll have to refer to my notes because there's just so much information. Um, let's start with the overall weekend. Begin with the beginning. Sprint and the practice leading up to it and then the sprint. Could have been a little misleading. Yes, Norris won it, but I would argue that it wasn't convincing. We can debate the whole stewarding and officiating ad nauseum, and I'm going to mention those things quite a few times during this video. But I think it is safe to say that there was the VSC and the red flag did impact upon the qualifying results significantly. And so I think Verstappen was close to attacking Piastri at the end. May not have caught Norris based on the amount of laps left, but he was probably going to attack Piastri, which means he definitely had pace. So I think if you look at what happened in the race, it's not necessarily entirely surprising. Yes, McLaren has had the measure of Red Bull and Ferrari for that matter for the last half of the season or more, but I think it's safe to say that Verstappen looked fast this weekend prior to the race itself. But the circumstances, when you look at how they combined, caused him to be as far back as he did. Similarly, I would argue the result with Gasly and Ocon. If you look at Alpine for the past couple of races, they've actually stepped up a bit. I think I even mentioned it, not in the last video because that was really super short, but in the one before, after Austin, I think I'd mentioned that Alpine seemed to be making a step in the right direction. Obviously, it's not, a quantum leap by any means, like what happened with McLaren, for example. But it's definitely a step in the right direction. To what extent Flavio and those people are influencing it, can't say. I definitely was not a fan of Bruno Famin. I thought he was a bit of an ass and a bit of a backstabber as well with Atmar. I think this guy, Ollie Oaks, is light years ahead. And I think it's possible that with a combination of this guy, Oaks, and Flavio, that we might actually see a resurgent Alpine next year. To what level, hard to say, but I think they'll redeem themselves a little from being backmarkers. Anyway, on to the meat of the matter. So after the sprint and Norris winning it, lot of talk about the point swing. Small though, because the sprint don't really give you a big points, but still, every point counts at this stage, right? Then came the real crunch of what we thought was setting the tone for the weekend, which was qualifying. And when you look at the penalties and the qualifying position, again, somewhat influenced by some questionable race director and maybe stewarding calls. Verstappen ended up down in 12th, and then with the engine penalty, 17th. Now, 17th is a little misleading because at the actual start of the race, two drivers dropped out and Sainz was starting from the pit lane. So he's really, technically speaking, 14th, but it's still a nominal 17th. And in terms of gap between him and Norris to the front, it was massive. And so I myself, as much as I had predicted from Austin that Norris is just not gonna win the championship based on where I see it. As much as I wanted it to kind of come down to a fight, even though I think Verstappen has done enough to deserve the championship this year, I actually wanted Norris to be in with a shout to win it, and definitely I would have wished that Leclerc had stepped up. But I had wanted it to come down a little closer, and so after Austin, I said to myself, I think Norris isn't gonna make it. But this weekend changed all that. I had to say to myself, man, no, this was what they were waiting on all along. A chance to reverse Verstappen scores either very little or even potentially none at all. And here's Norris on the pole. Well, again, this video I have to ramble because there's just so many different elements. I'm gonna save Verstappen's performance for a little later though. Not necessarily last, but a little later. I'm going to start with Norris again. Unbelievably, it seems, failing to effectively start a race. Now, let's not forget, essentially, we had 4 starts. Right? Well, 1 start and 3 restarts. Because the first one was the aborted start after Stroll, the rocket scientist, beached himself. I need to treat that specially, by the way. That has to be treated by itself, that whole Stroll incident. But suffice to say, Stroll ran off on the parade lap. And hence, the first start was aborted. The team radio told Norris to switch off the car and not move. He moved off anyway, drove around the lap. Now, again, we're going to touch on penalties and what could have or should have happened there. But let's just look at Norris's performance before we talk about what happened with stewarding and so on. Let's look at Norris's performance. So he screws up the first start by either not knowing or just having a brain fade and not following the rules. Interesting of note, Verstappen, Gasly, Ocon, and a few others obviously knew the rule and said it on the radio, said, we're not supposed to move, what's going on? So they are aware. It's not like the drivers are not aware of what the rules are. And this is professional sport. You're supposed to know the rules. I mean, this is your livelihood. This is make and break. Or make or break. And you're supposed to know the rules. So that's unforgivable in my opinion from Norris. But anyway, okay, he makes a mistake. So they come back and did the second start. Didn't get it right. Russell nipped him. On the third start after the red flag, he runs off the track. On the fourth start, he runs off the track. It's just, I don't know. When a man moves from first to sixth in the finishing results, and in fact, should have really been 7th or 8th, but was gifted positions twice by his teammate. He's doing something wrong. There's something fundamentally wrong with what Norris is doing. His racecraft, his headspace, his mental, I don't know if stability is right, but there's something going wrong there. There has to be. But anyway. Piastri did okay, solid, but not spectacular. I think he got the penalty he got was deserved, but just for the rest of the weekend, it just wasn't great. Mercedes, Russell and Hamilton. Russell actually did a good race, drove well. Hamilton was lost. I mean, I'm on record as saying I'm not a fan of Hamilton, but I certainly think he's one of the best drivers that we've ever had. And I just don't know what's going on there with him. He's just not coming to grips with the car. And I'm definitely not buying into this nonsense about sabotage. That has nothing to do with it. He's just not coming to grips with his car. When it's perfect and in its very perfect sweet spot, he'll produce good results. I mean, look at Silverstone and other times too, where I think he was on pole a couple times or whatever. But at the end of the day, he's just not coming to grips with the car and with any sort of consistency. I don't know if it's this ground effects era car with the ride height that they have to run at and making it very stiff. It just doesn't suit his driving style. I can't really say, but whatever the reason, it's just not working for Hamilton. Whether a fresh start at Ferrari is going to change that situation or not, it's hard to say. I do think that at his age, not that he's in any means too old or slow or whatever, but I do think he is past his prime in terms of, I certainly don't think 20-year-old Lewis Hamilton, compared to now, 39, soon to be 40-year-old Lewis Hamilton, is going to be driving at the same level. That's just not realistic. In the same way, I don't think Alonso, as much as Alonso is my favorite driver, there's no way remotely that I would suggest that Alonso is at the same level now that he would have been, 20 years ago. It's just not possible. And so, I don't know. Hamilton is not getting it right. Russell, however, is doing his best, but I don't know. Didn't work out. The strategy with the tires and the team and the call just before the red flag. I mean, we can debate that till kingdom come. I personally think it was a wrong call, but hindsight is always 2020. And I also think his tires were a lot more worn than Verstappen's was. So, he was complaining about the car aquaplaning badly even on the straights and so on. So, there's a lot of factors there. Mind you, he also then complained that he didn't want to come in. So, who knows? I'm not sure. Ferrari, I don't know. They didn't get it right this time either. Sainz was nowhere. Leclerc didn't run bad, but just not able to connect in an effective way. The rain really had most of the teams just upside down. You look at VCARB, Yuki was so strong earlier in the weekend. I mean, I was really looking forward to see what he would do in the rain. He faded. I mean, he started out good, but just, started moving backward. Lawson also wasn't bad, but made a lot of mistakes, very scrappy. If you look at some of the new guys, Colapinto, obviously that turned into a disaster. Bierman ran off multiple times. I think the rain and driving on the wet with these cars really, really, really highlights, the ability of a driver to come to grips with it. And, these guys are young. As much as we put pressure on them and expect them to perform, and they can sometimes, and they do sometimes, we also have to be realistic. And when you put them in situations like this, mistakes can happen. So I'm not going to judge any of them too harshly, especially the new guys. The Haas, based on their form lately, I was looking for a little more from them. Again, as I said, Bierman was decent, but just scrappy and ran off too many times. Hulkenberg was unlucky with that one. We'll kind of, I probably going to lump the Hulkenberg incident in with anything that we say about Stewart's, because being pushed by the FIA representative and then being disqualified by the FIA sounds a little weird. But anyway, that's a separate issue. Sauber, as usual, floating around the back. I mean, they're just nowhere. Pretty much, if I look at Aston Martin, I don't know what to tell you about Aston Martin. Just can't seem to get it right. And Stroll, let me touch on that Stroll thing now. What on earth was he doing? He crashed in every session, but then it's not the last one during the race was particularly egregious. After you run off, you drive the car, literally drive the car into the gravel trap. Now, I just there's no possible scenario because the steering didn't fail. He had steering control. So other than a lack of steering, there just can't be a scenario that I can think of that would cause you to drive into a gravel trap deliberately. And hence, I just come to the conclusion that this dude just needs to go. Just like I think Perez needs to go. Hopeless. There's just no redeeming either of the two of them anymore. They need to go. But plain and simple, they need to go. Williams really had a disastrous weekend. The cost to them, I can't even imagine how this is going to hit their cost cap. And this is already a team struggling with budget. So the amount of impacts between Albon and Colapinto with no results to show for it, that must really hurt. It is what it is with them. So that's kind of pretty much the results recap. Now let's touch on Verstappen. It's hard to overstate how devastatingly effective this dude is as a driver. I've said it a number of times that I am not, and I'm still not a fan in the sense of how I'd be a fan of, say, Alonso or Leclerc or Ferrari or McLaren even as a team. I'm just not a fan of Verstappen, and I'm definitely not a fan of Red Bull. But the reasons that I'm not a fan of them is nothing to do with driving. It's nothing to do with on-track performance, and certainly in the case of the team, nothing to do with their abilities, strategy calls, and pit execution, and so on. Because when you look at from a cold, objective standpoint, what you saw there was just a masterclass. That term is a bit of a cliche, but it's very much applicable. That was a masterclass, or a maxterclass in this case, because that was just an incredible drive. And I'm so annoyed when I look at a lot of these social media chat sites and chat groups and so on, people, and that garbage that Norris was talking about at the end about luck. Luck doesn't do that. That don't come from luck. Luck doesn't give you that level of braking on the inside into corner one in the wet that he did on Ocon and on Piastri. Luck that don't come from luck. Luck don't give you that outside line in corner 3 on the opening lap where you're just literally driving around everybody. That's not luck. That is skill. And I mean skill on a mind-boggling level. Somebody asked me very recently, a couple of days ago, after the race, about my thoughts on how I rated that drive, I thought it was the best. And I'm not going to necessarily say it was the best I've ever seen, because things are good or bad for different reasons, and it's very contextual. But what I will say is that the drive that I previously put as the best was Senna's drive at Donington in '93. And I would still give that the number one position, but more from the perspective of a single lap snapshot. Yes, he did eventually win the race, and I think he lapped like up to 3rd or 4th place or something like that, as I recall. But it's still, I think, as a lap, I'm going to give Senna the Donington, the props for that as the best I've ever seen. Primarily because of who he was passing. On his first lap, he's starting and passing the leaders. In his first lap, Verstappen is passing most of the guys at the back, which is a little easier. Not easy, but easier. Whereas Senna was passing the people at the front. Okay? And said people, of the 5 people that he passed on the Donington first lap in '93, 4 were world champions. Or 3 were world champions then, which is Prost, Villeneuve, and Hill. Is it Hill? Villeneuve? I don't know. But whoever. No, not Villeneuve. Foolishness I'm talking. Prost, Hill, and there was one. And Lauda, of course, yes. Those were the 3 world champions. And of course, Schumacher, who was going to become a world champion. So, I mean, the people that Senna passed on his first lap were the best of the best of the best. And he just blew by them as if they didn't exist. Which is why I still think that's the best I've ever seen. But this drive by Verstappen is close. And as a total race best, it's probably better than that race in terms of ability. And so it's close to the number one for me, this drive. Coming from where he did to win the race, deeply impressive. I mean, let's not forget, prior to the red flag, he had come up to what, sixth or fifth, or whatever it was, fourth. So I mean, that will come from luck. This is with them. And by the way, a very critical thing to factor in with this drive is it's without DRS. Now let's not forget, in the modern era of Formula One, with the way the aero is set up on the cars, that makes them unstable when you get close. DRS is critical. DRS factors in overtaking probably more than anything else. I mean, statistically, DRS factors in overtaking probably, I don't know. If I was to make, I guess, 80 or 90% of the time. In terms of passing, DRS factors in. Max made all of his passes without DRS, because obviously nobody has DRS in rain. So I think that DRS factor, or lack of it, really is the deciding factor for me in terms of how much I rated this drive. Because when you look at the other people in the race, how many passes did they make? Yes, okay, Gasly made a lot of passes. Gasly came from 13th and got himself up to third, which is deeply impressive considering that the Alpine isn't a great car. But ultimately, the passes that Max made, the way he made them, how he did it, zero mistakes. That's another thing. No mistakes. Lap after lap. No slips, no slides, no offs, no coughs, no hiccups. Just like a machine. As I call him in a little post that I had made after the race on YouTube. On Facebook, I mean, it's the Max Terminator. He just literally just destroyed them. So give credit where it's due. I don't care how bitter you are if you're an Elliott supporter or whatever. I don't care. If you can't give credit to this drive, you're not a fan. You're not even a motorsport fan, because something have to be wrong with you if you can't understand that this is one of the greatest drives that you've witnessed. Anyway, it is what it is. And in terms of the championship now, I can tell you right now, Lando is it's 62 points is not recoverable over 3 weekends, literally, unless Verstappen has 3 DNFs. Essentially, that's what it would require. 3 DNFs, and Lando would have to like win outright 2 out of the 3 races and come second or third in one. So realistically speaking, I think it's safe to say that the championship is over. As I said it after Austin, but I'm emphatic about it now. I cannot see anything changing again. This is it, right? And if you're not careful, if Red Bull's resurgence is actually real and not just a flash in the pan, and in terms of the car performance, and crucially, if some of the foolishness with McLaren and the wing and so on manifests itself, and all this madness I hear about the tires with the water in it and so on, if McLaren's performance doesn't either stay the same or worse, goes a little backward, then it's even worse. They're done. There's no question that the championship is over in terms of drivers. I think in terms of constructors, McLaren will still take it based on the margin that they have. But again, if they go backward based on any potential cheating that might have been going on and changes that they made, Ferrari is there to step up. So it will be interesting to see, I think, on the constructor's side, how that works out. Let me touch now a little on the complaint I had about stewarding and so on. Now, let's be real. As I said, I'm on record. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I don't think all of the things being said are true or even have any basis. However, not being a conspiracy theorist doesn't mean that you're blind either, or that there aren't commercial realities that can impact on things. Because make no mistake, some of the foolishness that I see taking place with stewarding and race officiating generally, whether it's with race director calls or whatever, don't add up. And I am not going to necessarily go down the route of the British bias thing that a lot of people are saying. Even though I do think that exists, but in terms of the impact it has on judgment calls, I'm going to more question is what is Liberty Media, the rights holder, the people with the real money and who stand to earn the most money. What is their role in it? Because ultimately, the earlier in the year that Verstappen wins the championship, is the less the viewership is going to be for the last few races. Because if he clinches the championship, then less people are going to watch the end of it. And that's not good for business, for Liberty. So it is in their interest to try to drag the championship out as much as possible. Now, that's not conspiracy, that's just a fact. The conspiracy would be, are they actually acting out on that and in what manner? That's where the conspiracy would be. But the statement that it is in their commercial interest to have the championship run to the end is just a statement of fact, right? Now, when you look at, let's look at, I said it the other day that I thought the penalties in Mexico were fair for the second offense, but I thought the first one was very, very questionable. A 10-second for that first one didn't sit well with me at all. For the second one, absolutely. Him should have get the 10-second. In fact, him should have get the 20-second for the second one. Right? But for the first one, I didn't think that was a reasonable judgment. And I already have my issues with Herbert from a long time with Alonso. And going back even further, I think Herbert is an ass, and I think he's very biased and unfair. So I've said that many times. So long before these last set of incidents with Verstappen, I have a problem with Herbert's approach to things. And how, as an adjudicator, supposedly unbiased, how harshly critical he is publicly of people like Alonso and Verstappen and so on. I have an issue with how he goes about things like that, because it leaves a bad taste in your mouth. I mean, I've been an official on many events. I'm actually a certified FIA official as a scrutineer. So I've been trained by the FIA. You're not supposed, there's certain things, even if you have a thought about something, you're not supposed to be saying that publicly, because that clearly shows a premeditated bias. So I have a problem with that. Just regardless, before we even reach to any judgments, right? So around the outset of an issue. However, when I look at Norris with the aborted start mistake, getting a £5,000 fine, but Leclerc, for saying an inappropriate word in a press conference, getting a 10,000 fine, I have to say to myself, hold on, there's something wrong here. Let's make sure we understand what that Leclerc, that Norris screw up with that aborted start means. Stroll is a dead car on the track. The driver is standing beside the track. Safety workers are on the track, and Norris starts and drives around. That is a massive safety violation. I mean, under no circumstances can that be possible, that not penalized. That's a major safety violation. How can that be a monetary fine? And not only a monetary fine, but something so insignificant that is like less than lunch money. As I said, it's a fine for driving around in an unsafe manner while workers and another driver and a dead car is on the track. You get a fine that's half of a man saying a bad word in a press conference. There's something fundamentally out of whack with that situation, right? Now, let's touch on, keeping on the Norris theme, let's touch on was it the first or the second time that he ran off on one of the restarts and he rejoined? I have a snapshot, and I'll probably post it on my Facebook page one of these days, where when he ran off, going through the runoff area, Hamilton and Alonso had clearly gotten ahead of him. But when he rejoined ahead of them. Now that's a clear advantage gain by running off. And you might even argue an unsafe rejoin to the track too. Nothing, not a peep from the stewards. What's going on there? Then you look at a Russell, and I think Hamilton, it happened as well, where Mercedes comes onto the grid and changes the air pressure in the tires. Now Russell denied it later in the driver's question section, but the cameras and the footage apparently shows that they did, and the FIA acted upon it. Guess what? A £10,000 fine to the team. So you're telling me that you can alter the spec of your car on the grid in a manner prescribed as being illegal, or at the very least against a technical regulation, because I believe Pirelli, the tire supplier, issues that as a technical thing, that you must not alter tire pressure on the car. It must be removed from the car, right? And to the best of my knowledge, the rules based upon FIA says you have to abide by those technical directives. Mercedes violates that. The driver lies about it in to the press, and all they get is a £10,000 fine. Wow. I think it's safe to say that if that was another driver, or like Verstappen or Red Bull, it wouldn't have been a fine. No, those would have been penalties, and probably big ones too. So I don't like that. I have a serious problem with that. Long story short, championship, in my opinion, was emphatically sealed by Verstappen at this race meet. He was under a lot of pressure. A lot of decisions went against him. Some rightly, and some, in my opinion, as I said, wrongly. But at the end of the day, he answered his critics, and he answered them in perhaps the best way that a driver can, by winning, and by winning in a dominant fashion. And again, I give credit where credit is due. I had said something very early in the year that though I'm not a Verstappen fan, I am becoming one. I've seen things in him that kind of reinforce why I didn't like him from a long time back. But I'm also seeing more and more things that make me realize that we're in a driver's championship, not a personality championship. And as a driver, this dude is the real deal. Can't fault him on that. Norris, in Jamaican parlance, not ready for this thing. Norris not ready for this. He don't have it. Not yet. He may have it in the future, but he don't have it now. And I will add to this as a final to close off. The nonsense that Brown and Stella spew on a daily basis is not helping Norris. Because if there isn't an acknowledgement of the fundamental errors and flaws in his starting and how he treats first lap tactics, he's not going to improve. And if they're there telling him nonsense in his ears that it's okay or that he's never wrong, they often say that about Verstappen, that when Verstappen does these outrageous things, if the team don't tell him he's wrong, he's not going to improve. Well, I can say the same exact thing for Norris. If Norris does not improve his race craft and his race tactics and his starts especially, he's gonna be where he is all the time. In fact, Piastri is gonna win the championship before him, in my opinion. Right? And I hear Stella chatting garbage about the car didn't suit the wet and it's not the driver's fault. So didn't the car get on the pole in the wet? How did Norris manage to get on the pole in the wet if the car is the problem? I mean, when you hear that statement from Stella was so stupid and so dishonest that it just makes me, I just have to shake my head. Anyway, on to Vegas. Let's see what happens.